So today's class is about project cost estimation. Now, last class we talked about project management and what the important points are to consider in any project to manage it correctly. Cost estimation is part of project management. So if you want your project to go smoothly, to manage it correctly, you need to cost estimate your project as well. So we talked a little bit about these things last time, but now the focus is on this. So the entire class we will talk about cost estimating methods, techniques, what things needs to be considered, why is it important, and also next class we will continue this lecture. So this lecture is divided into two parts because we cannot cover all the cost estimating methods together, okay? So today one part, next class the other part. So, why do we need to know about cost estimations? And more importantly, why companies need to know about it? So the company, for sure, any company, we said, deals with projects. So all the companies will deal with cost estimating for the project. So each project has its own cost estimating to be done. Now, if you want a successful project or a company wants a successful project, for sure this has to be done. Now, every company, as we said, deals with different projects. Depends on what industry the company deals with. It depends on the projects. Depends on, are you dealing with projects that are repeated or something totally new? All of these things affect the cost estimating in the end. And there could be variations, as we said, from project to project, business to business, but there are some major methods that all companies in all projects employ. And this is our focus, basically. So, now, there are some important things to consider when cost estimation is done of a project. So, you need to think about the scope of the project. The scope of the project, we discussed it last time, what a scope is. So all the points that are included in a scope need to be identified because each of these will affect the cost. Okay? Like for example, how many people will be working on the project? How many people are involved? 2 designers, 10 designers, what other people involved? It's not only the designers, you know. So this could be this is part of the scope, and which will affect the cost estimate. The more people involved, the more expensive the project will be. So, then, how long will it take to complete it? Do you have 2 days time, 1 week, 1 year to complete a project? Also, the more time it takes, the longer it takes, the more the cost of the project rises. So all of these factors, they influence. So they need to be identified first, and then decide how to include them in the cost estimate. So, what resources will be required? What machines? What kind of computers, for example? Other type of machines, depending on what you're producing. What kind of a design you're making or designing, okay? So all of this also are part of the scope and will affect the cost. Nature of the project. So, the nature, what type of project? This is very important. So, is it a new project that the company never dealt with before for the first time? Or is it something existing that it's just with small modifications? So, the cost will be different. And we mentioned about this topic a lot before. Anytime a company deals with a new project, something totally new, never dealt before in this company, there is a lot of other procedures that need to be done. And all of these procedures extra will cost money, okay? And this will add to the project, basically. It will make it more expensive. In general, we're talking. The size of the project. Every project, as we said, is different. Sometimes you can have a very small project. Sometimes the project is really, really big with a lot of steps and sub-steps and tasks and so on. So you need to really understand what is the size of this project, because you need to really put it down to its individual parts to know how to estimate the cost for it. So the more accurate you as a company manages to do the estimates, the better the outcome of the project will be. And the more mistakes is done in the estimates, the cost estimates, the more problems it will cause during the projects and after. So we will also talk about these points more as we go along. Now, we need to identify the key components, the expenses basically, that basically any project goes through. Because when we say expenses, it means, when we say this is an expense, it means I have to, as a company, spend money on it. So we need to know what are our expenses in a project. Like for example, okay, we already mentioned before the number of people working in a project. This is called the labor, okay? The labor, all of the people, for example, involved in this project, these people take salaries. Yes or no? They take salaries. So also the longer the project takes, the more you have to, basically the more expensive it gets, because you keep paying the salary and these people work on this project only. So the labor, you need to identify exactly, okay, who is working, how many people, all of these things. Also the materials, the cost of the resources needed to create the products or the design, call it. So if you're a company that actually makes the design, not only designs it, but actually makes it, prints it, whatever, produces it, depends on what. So there will be what? Materials involved. These are part of the resources. Humans are also part of the resources. So all of this costs money. If you buy these materials to make your design, it costs money. So it will add to the project. So these are also expenses, very important ones to consider. Equipments. The cost of not only buying, but also maintaining equipments. Now, if you're a company that has devices in it, like for example, you have a big printing machine in the company, that offset printing, that prints in four colors. Now, anytime it has a problem, mechanical problem or something happened, you will not throw it away. It is an expensive machine. You will do what? Maintain it. You will bring someone to repair. This costs money. Okay, this also costs money. So over the long term, this machine will break down. It needs repairs. Not only the initial cost. So the cost of buying equipment and also maintaining the equipment. This also is all involved in the expenses that you put that can happen during a project. Now, services. What do we mean with that? The cost of external work that the company may need for any given project. So, external work, as we said in the past, the companies, not every company have all the basically tools and equipments necessary to complete a design project. Sometimes they have certain equipments and they stop at this point. Then ask another company for service. Like for example, I don't have this particular machine, but I need it for this project. So I send the project to the other company. The other company does whatever it does for my project, returns the project to me. But this is a service. I need to pay money to the other company who does help me with the service. So all of this costs also money to consider. Now, not every project includes all of these, but most of these are included in almost any project, okay? The software. Software, you need obviously software for the computers, programs, all of this also cost money. Hardware is the actual, computers. So at any time you might need new computers, you might need to repair them. So all of this also adds to the expenses of a project. Facilities. What's that? The cost of renting or using specialized equipment and so on. So the facility, the place. So this here is my company. So I'm obviously paying rent to someone to use this facility for my company. Or it can be my own. In this case, I'm not paying rent, but most of most of the companies paying rent. Okay? And it depends on the location of the company. Sometimes the rent can be very, very high. So if you open a company on a main street, main highway, for example, where a lot of cars pass, people pass, and it's a main road, have a lot of businesses, the rent could be very high. But if you open the same company in a village where nobody will know about you, it will be lower. It's the same when you buy a house. The same. Some houses are very expensive, some houses very cheap. Depends on the location, not only the size. Okay? So, facilities, rent, and also renting specialized equipment. Sometimes you rent devices. This also you need to pay money that you don't have, that you don't own. Contingency costs. We already explained in the past lectures what is contingency as a word mean. So costs added to the project to address specific risks. So the additional cost that we also always consider to add so that in case something happens, something wrong happens, we have additional money available to cover it. So contingency costs, these are also costs. Now, maybe you will need them, maybe you will not need them during the project, but it needs to be available when and if needed. So they are part of the expenses. So let's look at actually the two major techniques of approaching cost estimation. There is two major techniques, ways, okay? The top-down method and the bottom-up method. Now, each one of these could include many methods of cost estimating, but these are the major techniques of how to approach a cost estimate. Through the top-down or the bottom-up technique. So what is the major difference between them? Here, so the top-down, it has also another name. Also it's called historical costing. This technique, top-down approach, relies on historical project data. That means the company, as we said before, usually companies deal every time they deal with a new project, it is usually similar to the projects beforehand. So they have good experience with them, good knowledge. So when they have a new project that is similar to the previous project, they use the historical data. So data, cost estimates that they used for the previous projects, and use that to apply to the new project. With small modifications, of course, but in general, the essence they already have. So they use this historical data, okay? Historical project data. So this only can happen if performing similar projects. So in the past, I printed a brochure, A4 size, okay, with 4 colors. Now somebody asked me for a brochure, A4 size, 4 colors. Very similar projects. I can use the data from the previous to tell the client, if the client asks me how much it costs to make this brochure, 500 copies, I can tell him because from the previous, from the historical data I will take. Okay? Now, if costs have changed a bit, taxes have risen, maybe I want to increase the cost. Okay, but in general, the essence I take from history, okay? From historical data. Will you please stop talking? Immediately. So the top-down approach is using already available data in the company from previous projects. This is the main thing. And also, let me see just something. Now, the bottom-up, the other one, the bottom-up technique, this basically project is using, starting from the details. So how? So this is a very accurate method. It can be very time-consuming, okay, to calculate, to work with this approach, because it deals with the small details, and the cost of each detail has to be found. So it can be a lot time-consuming, especially if the project is large. If you're dealing with small projects, it's not a big deal. But Excuse me?
صار انصراف.
I don't know, I'm recording now, we have a lecture, close the door.
بس افتحي اللابتوب.
Okay, I don't know.
صار خلصيني.
I don't want anyone disturbing the lecture. Close the door behind you, please. Close the door at least behind you. So, in this method, the project deliverables, we already described before what a deliverable is. So what in the end is the outcome of this project? What do I need to deliver to the client, okay? So all the project deliverables are divided into a series of tasks or components. So all these deliverables, there is maybe one major deliverable, but until you get to that, there are several tasks, several components you need to go through. So it's divided into all of its tasks, subtasks, whatever available, and basically whoever is estimating the cost of completing each component separately. So for this task or component to be done, what labor costs going, what equipment's costs going, everything, the material costs, for this particular task. Then you have maybe 20, 30, 40 other tasks to do. So they calculate in detail for every single component the cost, and then put it all together to estimate the overall final cost of the project. So this is very detailed, focused method, and as I said, it can be time consuming, especially with big projects, because big projects have a lot of tasks to go through. So a lot of details. And this is basically the major step that this method goes through. So break the project into smaller tasks, okay? Then decide how long it will take you to perform each small task. Because you see, the time is also very important. Like, do you need a week, a day? It's a big difference, okay, regarding money. So how long to perform each task and to calculate. Then, basically, the company needs to assign a rate based on the hourly rate of each small task. Hourly rate. It's like the designer, for example, works each day for, let's say, 8 hours. For each hour he works on this project, what's the cost? This is the hourly rate. It's not based on daily, like for example days. It's usually on an hourly rate. Like, you need to finish this task in 2 hours. And in real companies, this is how it is. You don't have time to extend the way you like. This task needs to be completed as soon as possible, always. 1 hour, 2 hours given, that's it. And if this time is put into the cost estimate, you must finish. If something happens, you cannot finish, then another designer will take over. And if this keeps repeating, the company will get rid of you. They will put a designer who is more hardworking. So keep this in mind. That's why if you complain, some of the students in the universities, too much work given by the teachers. This is nothing to what you will see later in life. This is just a small piece of the hard work that will come if you work in a company. Okay? So, then, all the prices are combined for the project, for the different parts are combined to find out the complete amount that the project will cost, in addition to adding the contingency cost. So a contingency amount must be decided depending on what type of risks can happen. So how much money to put aside in case something can go wrong. And then, of course, it's presented to the client or to the boss, it depends. Now, as a summary, the top-down approach, okay, goes from the general to the specific. So it starts with the general and then goes down to the details. The bottom-up approach starts with the details, a lot of details, and then slowly moves to the general So the general, for example, cost estimate for this project. Here, it starts with the historical data. So it starts with general things, and then if there is need, they move to the specifics. So this is basically two different approaches, how to approach a specific cost estimate for a project. Now, the first, so all of these things, so after you decide which method, which approach to use to cost estimate, you know about your project scope, all the details, all the resources needed, everything. The budget needs to be decided. This is the first and most important project, cost estimate, and the most critical. So what is the budget available for this project? Every project have a different budget for it. So you cannot exceed this budget. So if I say this project will have a budget of 1,000, if it turns out it costs 2,000, we have a big problem. So this 1,000 have to include all the costs, everything, the expenses, the contingency costs, everything in it. Okay? So then we have a budget for a specific project. Now, there is a problem here if you underestimate or overestimate a budget. What can happen, for example, if I underestimate a budget? For example, I have a project, and in reality it will cost me 1,000 JDs, but I underestimate it, and I think it will cost only 500 JDs. This will have a positive part where, when the client comes and he asks, what will it cost to make this design? Because you underestimated the budget, you will give him a lower price. You will give him a lower price, the client will be very happy. Oh, it's like this, for example, will cost only like this, great. Okay, I will do it with this company because it's so cheap. But underestimating a budget will cause the company problems. The client will be happy, but the money will be taken from the company profits. So the company will lose money. So what will you profit in the end? Maybe nothing. If you underestimate your project in a big way. So here you can lose money as a company. Okay? So you need to be careful with underestimating projects, project budgets. If you overestimate, what can happen? Like the project in reality cost 1,000, but I think through my calculations that I will need 2,000. This means when the client comes and asks me how much does it cost to do this project, I will give him a high price. And the client may say, oh look, it's kind of very expensive, I will do it in the other company. The other company offered me with less cost, with less price, you know. So in this case, what can happen? You may lose the client. You may lose the client if it's too expensive. So both this and this can be good in a way and bad in a way. So here you might gain a client but lose money. Here you might lose a client and also lose the money if he doesn't do the project with you. So you need to be very careful that as a company, that the budget is calculated as much as possible correctly. Not to be overestimating a lot or underestimating a lot. If it's a slight amount, it's not a big deal, but big amounts cause problems. Now, to minimize errors to happen and to make sure a cost estimate is more accurate, a feasibility study should be carried out, including the other cost estimates. So a feasibility study must be considered. So, what is a feasibility study? It identifies the risks and options. So all the risks that can go wrong, because you see the risks are the biggest problem, really, because they can happen unforeseen. Everything else you might know exactly, like you know the cost of the materials, you know in general the equipments needed. So there is no a lot of surprises. You know how many people you have in the company that will work on the project. So it's a little bit more stable. But here, risks, suddenly outside risks or unforeseen risks can happen, and you need to foresee, try as much as possible these to be identified so that you have enough money in the budget to cover. Please, whoever is talking, to leave the class. Now it's time to listen. Okay, discussions between you later. How many times should I say? Okay. So, once you identify the risks, they become less dangerous. They can be managed better because you expect them, not something unexpected. So, now, to carry out a feasibility study in general, these things need to be taken into consideration. The company owner might have some requirements, okay, that will influence this. The market needs. The market is constantly in a state of change, so it needs to be observed. And what needs could arise from that could affect, your budget. So, for a specific project, government rules, requirements, also this you need to be aware of. They can influence directly the cost of a project. The customer needs, of course. So, if you remember last class, we discussed the stakeholders in a project. So basically all the requirements of all the stakeholders, what can happen, all of these things need to be considered if you want a decent project estimate. So, any stakeholder that could cause risk to the project. Now, in the feasibility study can be also included a SWOT analysis. Now, this SWOT analysis, many designers use it on their own. Like, without estimating the cost of a project, without going through the other details, they use SWOT analysis as designer. So what is a SWOT analysis? The strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats of a specific project. So, for example, here it's not very clear, but later in the PDF you can see what's written. For example, strengths can include, I will not go through all of them, just as example. The strengths, for example, the things the company is good at doing. Every company is good at certain things and not very good at others. So what are you good at? This is a strong point that you have. What qualities separate you from your competition? So what is unique about your company that the competition doesn't have? This is a strong thing, okay? So you need to basically write down all the strong points that the company has, all of them. The assets you have, what you have in the company that can help you with projects, everything. Then the weaknesses, for example, what the company doesn't have. For example, I don't have certain equipment that really is needed, but I don't have it, okay? You don't have, for example, what the competition, the other companies do better than you. So this is a weakness of your own company. So all of these weaknesses need to be written down, resource limitations, and so on, okay? Then, the opportunities. For example, an opportunity could be here if there is not a lot of competition around. If you're the only company in this area, like this, producing this type of designs, then and there is no competition, this is an opportunity here. Okay? This is an opportunity. So, for example, a threat could be somebody, for example, negative press, for example, media thing. For example, somebody is talking about your company in a bad way, and this is spread through the media. So everybody hears, and they're destroying the company name. This is a threat to you as a company, okay? And this can mean losing customers. So all of these major things you see, like strengths, weakness, opportunities, threats, they might look like something general and not related, but they are related to every single project you do as a company and to the costs you put on this project. For example, if you have a lot of threats and weaknesses in the company, and let's say a client comes to you, maybe if you give the client a certain price, and he knows about your company, that you're kind of not a very good company, and you're putting me this price, you're giving me, it's too much. He will go away. So it's like the expectation from the client is for you to work for cheaper. So it can have a lot of issues, you know. So a SWOT analysis is part of the feasibility study in general, but as I said, some designers use it in the projects on their own, as separately than, because designers not always estimate projects. If you work alone on a design project, and cost estimation not required of you, but still SWOT analysis will give you a good vision of where this project is going. So are the opportunities, the positive parts, higher than the negative parts? This is something you can determine after this analysis for a certain project. So, in general, the feasibility study helps to find out or determine, does the company possess the required resources, technologies, and so on, and does the proposal offer a reasonable return versus risk? This is important, what I was talking about. So, as a result, you know, okay, the returns to me, the profit to me, if it's money or a successful project or whatever, is it higher than what can go wrong, the risks? So this is important here to find out. Okay, so this is important to find out in every project, because if the returns are less, then maybe it's better not to start at all on this project or make major changes before we start. Milestone estimates. This is basically milestone estimates are mostly used during the design process. It's like when the design actually starts. What I mean is the sketching phase, the development of the idea stage, all of these things until the design is finalized. This is mostly used here because designers often get carried away. It's like I'm working on a sketch, and I can get easily carried away. I forget that I have to be done by tomorrow. It's like you keep on drawing, and get lost into this phase, and forget the limited time you have for this stage. So, through the project timeline, as discussed from last class, we will have milestones, okay? Milestones. So, each of these milestones, how much time allocated for it? For example, for the drawing stage, idea stage, there is time periods. And this, how much money will it cost to the company? Like this person, how long will they work on this particular milestone? So this thing needs to be put a number to it, because this will affect the overall budget of the project, the final budget. So, no surprises should happen on the way. Like every time a surprise happens during such a thing, it's a bad thing for the project. It's a bad thing for the company. It could mean loss of money. So, this is why the milestone estimates is very important, especially during the design phase, to make sure that every designer works on every task according to the time allocated, not take more time than needed. And the cost for each of these milestones need to be identified depending on the hourly rate. The last one for today that I will talk about is the life cycle costing. So this method is a method of estimating the costs associated with product, starting from the initial cost to the end of its life. So it's like the entire life cycle cost of a product. Now, this involves, in general, 6 types of costs. So these 6 types of costs, after, for each one, the price is it's put together, and we can say the life cycle cost of this product is, for example, a certain amount. We will have an example now to see what it is. So, 6 types of costs include the purchase cost, maintenance, operational, financing, depreciation, end-of-life costs. And the summation, that means putting them all together, gives you the final cost. Okay? It's actually very simple, as long as you remember these in general. So, here is a very simple example. If a company wants to purchase a printer, a new printer, okay? Every company needs printers. So, the printer, the old one broke, you need a new one, you buy it. Okay. The price is 2,000, for example, for this printer. It costs 2,000 in the market. The company buys it. But this is not the real price. Now we need to calculate what will be the life cycle cost of this printer, because who will pay for it? The company in the end. Maybe not now. Maybe after months, 2 months, 2 years, 3 years, but the company will pay this price. So from where? From the profits. So all the profits you make in a company, you pay for these additional things. So what are they? So initially you buy the equipment. You buy it. Then the installation. Well, so for example, what this included? Setting up and delivering. Like, are you going to go and carry the printer on your back and go to the company? No. It will be delivered to you by a car, by a van, okay? And this will cost money. You have to pay for it. Now, installation could be, the installation. The person actually putting the printer and making it to work and so on. Okay? All of this costs money. Now, operating. So, spending, for example, if we're talking about a printer, you will be spending money on cartridges and paper. This printer is useless if you don't put paper in it, and if you don't have ink. So you have to buy the ink, you have to buy papers, and this is an ongoing process that you have to keep spending money on. So, also electricity. The printer cannot work without electricity. So how much electricity you will pay per day or per month, for example, for this printer? You may think these are small things like, do I need to calculate now exactly? Yes, if you are a company and you don't do that, you will lose money and you will not know from where. It's like, I need to know that this is the reason for it. This is the reason for why I'm losing money. You have to calculate everything if you want to succeed. So, the electricity, how much? Then, maintenance. How many times the printers break down or something happens and nobody can fix it? You need to bring someone, you need to pay money again, okay? Maintenance cost. Financing, what does that include? For example, you want to buy an equipment for the company, but you don't have money to buy. Like 2,000, so expensive. Like maybe I don't have cash, for example. Then I will pay by credit card. So I take from the bank credit. Great. But I have to repay the credit. Now, how much? The percentage. Okay? This can be depending on the bank, depending on which country you live in. This credit card, as soon as you take money from the bank, the bank expects you every month to start repaying slowly the amount with interest. With interest on top. That means if you take, for example, 100 JDs from the bank as a credit, maybe you have to repay 200 or 300. So this needs to be taken into consideration. Depreciation. Every device will lose value over time. So if this device costs now 2,000, after a year it will cost less and less and less. Maybe you notice these things like with, for example, with cars. You buy a new car, then after 5 years you want to sell the car, but you cannot sell it on its original price. It's depreciated. It was 20,000, it became 10,000, and less and less and less, okay? So the depreciation each year. And the disposal. In the end of the life of this printer, when you want to throw it away, still you cannot put it on your back and carry it out. You need to call someone with a van, please take it, dispose of it, still paying money. So, when you buy anything as a company, you buy it at a certain price, but end up paying much more in the end. Much more because of these that we just covered. And this is important because projects, when you have a project to do, it is done through devices, through equipments. Every equipment, every device, everything you buy to do the project have these points. So you need to consider them when deciding on the budget of the project. So its general advantages and disadvantages. Of course, if you do a life cycle costing, it can help you plan efficiently, more better, especially in the long-term plan. So, for example, as a company, you can decide where to put your investment. You have a certain amount of money. I need a printer, but I also need a computer. So, should I buy the printer or the computer? I don't have enough money for both. Should I buy the computer cash and the printer maybe take credit from the bank? So all of these are decisions to be made. Where to put the investment? Where will I get more return? So, if you have two assets, okay, to consider. Should I use this? Should I purchase this or purchase that? Okay? So all of this should be in general in the mind of the company when deciding what purchase to make, how to make the purchase. By cash, by credit card, in what way? Disadvantages, it can be, of course, time consuming, a little bit costly to make, and it's not like very, very reliable, the life cycle cost. Because some of the costing, you predict what will happen in the future, and things can change. So it's not 100% reliable. So this is its problem in general. So, for today, this is enough. Next class, we will continue with other costing methods. Yes, so let me close this.